What's up, Ragin Nation? How y'all doing? This is Alex here. You're watching the Ragin Ronin review. In this video, I want to review Django Unchained, the latest movie by Quentin Tarantino, starring Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz, Leonardo DiCaprio, Samuel Jackson, and Kerry Washington. This movie, I would have to say, is a movie that is about slavery, set amongst the backdrop of a Western, and then it transitions back to slavery, and then once the shootouts start happening, it's back to being a Western, and then throw in a little bit of blaxploitation in the mix, but at the end of all this, it is just a very completely satisfying film. The story plays out kind of like True Romance in terms of its structure, but it also kind of feels like Inglourious Basterds because we're dealing with two different ethnic groups who have tension against each other. But because it has so many layers to it, it still does play out more like True Romance, just because of the way it was scripted. When you get to one stage of the movie, it sets it up for another stage. And the movie has a story that is just full of crazy surprises. However, if you really think about it, we already know that Django is going to prevail in the end. We just want to know what he does to get to that point and in what spectacular fashion. The movie is about revenge, redemption, and heroism. I would have to say that the antagonist of the film as a whole is slavery/racism, and it's personified through the character of the evil Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think that he should land himself an Oscar for Best Male Actor in a Supporting Role. Jamie Foxx, while he does play the title character, kind of fades into the background. It's definitely a great role for him, but compared to Leo, Samuel Jackson, and Christoph Waltz, he doesn't really have a whole lot of moments that make him that memorable. But I have to say that his best moments are in scenes of physical action and also when he's emoting without any dialogue. Some might feel that the character of Django is secondary, but when you're really thinking about it, his character is actually developing as we move along. His character is actually learning from Schultz without the audience really knowing. It's very subtle. Speaking of Schultz, Christoph Waltz puts on an excellent performance, making his character so likable. But I have to say that it's the polar opposite of Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds. The sinisterness of the evil Hans Landa is very much transferred onto the character of Calvin Candy. Calvin Candy's got the charm, and he just represents pure evil. But Calvin Candy, when compared to Hans Landa, he is no Hans Landa. He's not as intelligent as Hans Landa, and that's why he needs to be complimented by Steven, played by Samuel Jackson. And together, Jackson and DiCaprio, their chemistry is on fire. But I still love watching Christoph Waltz. His character is just so much fun to watch. And Samuel Jackson once again proves that he can play any role that you give him. And Tarantino and Jackson totally complement each other because when Samuel Jackson is out there performing, he knows exactly what Tarantino wants from him. These are all memorable characters. And I find that it's interesting how the character arc is set up for Django. Because while Jamie Foxx plays the title character, he only really redeems himself in the third and final act of the film. But let me tell you, it is totally satisfying. And Kerry Washington does exactly what is necessary in making her appear as a very believable damsel in distress. And it is through her very emotional performance. And the main cast is of course complemented by some very despicable supporting characters that you just love to hate. You just know that something is going to happen when Django is on screen with any of these characters. Now let's talk about the direction. Without a doubt, Tarantino directs this movie with precision. I'm not even going to talk about the dialogue. We already know what he's capable of as a writer. I want to talk about the direction, and he wanted this movie to make us feel uncomfortable from the very beginning. And he does so, but he concludes this movie with us feeling completely satisfied. Along the way, we'll be treated to feelings of disgust, frustration, sadness, and even laughter. But in the end, we're meant to feel uncomfortable, and that's exactly what he wanted. And this was very important because it made the character development of Django to feel more believable. Another thing that I love about this movie is the attention to detail. From the various set designs, to the art department, to just some very fine touches in the cinematography. There are, of course, those classic scenes in a Western film where you have a stranger on a horse trotting his way into a new town, and then everybody just staring at him. And also right down to the familiar Wild Wild West saloon scene where our protagonists walk right in and then the bartender feels reluctant to serve them. These are really classic scenes, and Tarantino gave us his version of that. Let me give you an example of a scene which made a character just seem much more fascinating just because of Tarantino's direction. It was a scene where Dr. King Schultz was pouring himself and Django a beer. And you would get this close-up of the glass being filled, and then an even more close-up shot of Dr. King Schultz using a knife to remove some foam off the beer. And he does this twice. And during the whole time when we're watching this, it really adds to the character. It makes us feel like asking the question, what is Schultz thinking of as he's doing that? What's going through his head? Why does he feel the need to do that twice? And these are just little fine details. Some people might not notice it, but some people will think that these are beautifully shot scenes. And I love that about Tarantino. It makes the scene as a whole feel more complete, and it also makes the characters just so much more interesting. As for the tone of the film, we know that Tarantino is full of surprises, and that is no different, especially when it comes down to the humor. There will be little bits of comedic beats added to the dialogue, but what I didn't expect is that he would devote an entire scene to just plain humor. And that scene I'm referring to is the one that has Jonah Hill's cameo in it. And Tarantino also knows that he creates the rules in his own films, and he will add these little Tarantino-esque gags in there. And these are little nods to fans of his work. But what I love best about Tarantino is his ability to turn a normal situation, something as simple and as normal as having dinner, to being one of the most intense sequences ever put on film. It could be a dinner service or a Mexican standoff, or something as normal as one character requesting another character for a handshake. And this is complemented by his smart writing and the brilliant performances from his actors. Now this brings us to the action, and this is a very ultra-violent film due to its brutal nature and its subject matter. Tarantino does not hold back when trying to make us feel uncomfortable, and I respect that about him because he's not afraid to give us a balls-out film that deals with a very controversial and ugly subject matter that is a piece of American history. There are scenes of torture, two people just beating the crap out of each other to the death with just their bare hands against their own will. And of course, with this movie being a Western, there will of course be shootouts. And I think it's about the same amount, if not more action than in Inglourious Basterds. But the action kind of plays out like the action in Kill Bill, in the sense that it's more like cartoon violence, because it is overly gory. I understand that the violence in Kill Bill was done a certain way because it was trying to imitate samurai films, but I think the amount of gore in Django Unchained, especially from a gunshot wound, was just a little bit excessive. And it's to the point where it feels cartoony. It made some people feel a little bit disgusted because it was a bit overdone, while other people felt like laughing. I personally felt it was overdone, but it still looked funny. At the end of all this, this is one of the most satisfying movie experiences that I've ever had. And I'd also like to add that with Tarantino being in the director's chair, he understands that film is an experience in vision and sound. And this brings me to talk about the soundtrack. He's added such a superb choice of music to complement his film. We are treated to original pieces from artists like John Legend, Anthony Hamilton, and even remixed versions of James Brown and Tupac. Although I did feel that the Rick Ross hip-hop song felt a little bit out of place, the other classic songs that were chosen to be in the film were definitely a nice touch. Like I said before, this movie was a completely satisfying experience, and it was engaging from beginning to end, and this was all because of the well-written characters and the superb direction. In fact, this movie, I would say, falls on the same outstanding level as Inglourious Basterds. 9.5 out of 10. Highly recommended. Check it out as soon as you can. I actually feel like checking it out again. By the way, now that I've done my review for Django Unchained, stay tuned for my next video. That would be my top 10 movies of 2012. You won't want to miss that video. As always, if you enjoyed this review, hit that like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation, and also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name is Alex Yu, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace. You could have the score from IGN, you could have the score from Rotten Tomatoes, or Metacritic, or IMDb. So really, there's only two definitive lists.